going on, everybody? It is Anthony from #BetheChange. Truth will set you free. And of course, where you are right now, which is Blunt Force Discussion. We are back doing digital episodes. I know I got the Blunt Force Logic up there, which pretty much everything with discussion and logic, it's hand in hand. So it is what it is. Thank you guys for joining. Again, this will probably go up in the middle of the week. So whatever night of the week it is, welcome. Please do us the favor, share this out there, make sure people know what's going on. If you want to support shows like this, as we are, I'm kind of, as you guys know, I'm kind of at the end of the string where I'm like, we're gonna keep pushing this. I would love to continue to go into studio. That is not cheap. Please hook us up, support us at patreon.com/blunt force discussion. I'll put that on the bottom of the screen throughout the show, on and off, or become a member of the Great American Syndicate, which you can join just by going to greatamericansyndicate.com. Also, make sure you check out some of our sponsors. First off, Monate. Thank you to them. Thank you to Tony Van Schoik. You can go to bluntforce.mymonate.com. I mean, typically I wear a hat. I've been using their products now for 5 months. I'll ask Michelle, our guest, when she gets up here, does the hair look good or does it not? I am also 2 hair transplants in. That's a totally different story for a different day. They've got Rejuvenique oil. They've got some really great products. They've got hair, conditioner, skin, all the above. It is vegan, cruelty-free, tested probably more than any of the other products that you'll find on the market. They've done over $2.3 billion in sales in their 8 years. And they're also a network marketing company. If you are interested in becoming a market partner of any way, shape, or form, finding side income, no matter what country you're in. Our guest is from Canada. They have them in Canada as well. Hit me up with an email, bluntforcediscussion@gmail.com. We also typically do a shot seat, the Don't Get the Shot seat by Dr. Artist Labs, also one of our other sponsors. Go to thedrartistshow.com to check that out. One of my friends just worked with her last week. She had the coof. She wasn't feeling great. We had to work, and I handed her over gently a bottle of the, not approved to say this by the FDA, but told her to slightly overdose on the Dox Viral Defense. Got things like quercetin in it, zinc. She also had some vitamin C. Woke up the next morning at 6 a.m. ready for work and goes, was it that did it? No, it wasn't. Of course it was. Anyways, all the things. And there's also video that'll be in the comments or in the description. It is, if you have had the jibbity jab for whatever reason, there are ways of ridding it from your system, getting your glutathione up. And we have a suggestion of that. That link will be there. It is a Rumble link. That is the only place that'll have it. That was why we were banned off YouTube for a week. Whatever. All right, ladies and gents, I'm going to introduce our guest. It is, if you don't know, it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. It is the end of October. And she has a really amazing story of what she's been through, what she's gotten through, where she is now. She is based in Canada, and she's got a very good Instagram following, and she really is just trying to look at she organizes businesses. Actually, that's her handle, and she's phenomenal. The fact that she had to live through having a cancer diagnosis during the pandemic, which is a whole different level. We're going to have a great conversation on this episode of Blunt Force Discussion. So ladies and gentlemen, introducing to the digital stage, Michelle from Toronto. What's going on,
Hello.
Michelle?
Hi, Anthony. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So introduce yourself to everybody. Tell everybody a little bit more about who you are.
So my name is Michelle. I live in Toronto, Canada, and I was diagnosed with breast cancer in January of 2020. My journey started in August of 2019, so pre-pandemic. And how it started was that I was feeling pain in my chest. And so normally you think that you're going to feel a lump, and that's not always the case. There's a misconception that you're always going to feel a lump. I went to my general practitioner and was told that it was probably nothing, and was told to go home and not worry about it. But I was worried. I knew something was wrong. And so over the next 6 months, I underwent 4 mammograms and 4 breast ultrasounds. And why they sent me for so much imaging, I have no idea still to this day. But in that time, my breast cancer had spread to my lymph nodes, and they weren't sending me for a biopsy. So I was left in the cold, like not knowing what was going on.
Give me that timeline again. Say that one more time. So August is when it all started of 20.
August is when it started. Yes.
Okay. And then go through that what like month by month one more time because I think that's interesting how much time they let pass the wrong way. So important.
Okay. So I began feeling pain in my breast in August of 2019,
No lump.
and no lump.
Okay.
hmm
All right.
And then I went through 5 months of 4 ultrasounds and 4 mammographies. And they were saying nothing to me all the while. They weren't telling me what was going on. I knew something was wrong. I knew that they were seeing something. Otherwise, they wouldn't continue to send me for all of this imaging. Why they did that, I have no idea. I don't know if they were trying to delay me from getting into the system. They delayed the biopsy. And then I finally went for a biopsy in January of 2020.
By your own
And
choice, or was it recommended by a doctor?
no, by that time, they had said that you need to go for a biopsy. We are seeing something and we need to determine whether or not it's benign or malignant. And so then it was about a 4 week wait for results. The results are sent to the States for diagnoses, which is very interesting. And then just pre the lockdowns for the pandemic, at the end of February, I was diagnosed with a type of breast cancer called invasive ductal carcinoma. And my type of breast cancer, as with many types of breast cancers, was hormone positive. So it was estrogen positive, progesterone positive, and something called HER2 positive, which meant that it was spreading at a rapid rate. I was told by my oncologist at that time that probably if we would have left it for another 6 months, it probably would have gone from the stage 2B grading that it had, which was an early stage breast cancer, to a stage 4. And stage 4 is malignant and obviously incurable. So it was moving that fast. So that's 5 month delay of all that imaging. I mean, it didn't do me any good.
No, definitely not. I mean, that's why I was, making sure the calendar and is that a Canadian because we know people on the left will of course be like, "Oh, they have free healthcare in England and in Canada and all this stuff." Was the delay, do you think, because you were still going in, was the delay at all due to the more socialist form of healthcare, or was it just bad doctors?
No, 100%. I mean, it's pre-pandemic, the Canadians' socialized healthcare system was in dire straits. The emergency rooms are overrun. There's not enough hospital beds. 1 in 5 Canadians doesn't have a general practitioner. There's not enough doctors up here and nurses. Also, because a lot of nurses had been fired during the pandemic, we're in an even more dire situation now. Then hits COVID, and COVID, in my opinion, was used as an excuse to say, okay, like we're inundated with COVID patients. We can't serve all these other patients. But we were doing poorly before that. So I don't think it's a good excuse. But, the problem that became then is that after my diagnosis, is that while they did send me for chemotherapy fast, so I should backtrack a bit. I went in for my first surgery at the end of February 2020. And I was given an option between a lumpectomy, which is to remove the tumor and the surrounding tissue and the lymph nodes that it had spread to, or a mastectomy. And I thought, well, that seems like a very invasive surgery and probably something that I don't need. Unfortunately, I realized that I made the wrong mistake, or a big mistake, when they told me that they found 8 centimeters of precancerous cells. And when I asked my surgeon whether or not all of those cells were removed, she told me to the best of her knowledge they were, but there was no guarantee. And so one of the things that happened during COVID, and I was someone that was directly affected by it, is that cancer surgeries and other surgeries were canceled. And so
Wait,
over the
cancer surgeries were canceled, not like
cancers,
breast
yeah,
augmentation surgeries. Cancer surgeries were canceled.
cancer surgeries were canceled, heart surgeries were canceled, everything was canceled. only thing that mattered was COVID and COVID patients. That was it.
Crap. I didn't know.
So,
Do you know if that's not the way that was in the US though? I don't.
not to my knowledge.
Yeah,
No.
they elective surgeries were gone, and I know that sometimes if you had basic things like basic heart issues or checkups were not allowed. But if you had cancer and you needed cancer surgery, I think in the United States, the place where we don't fully have socialized healthcare, they were
Right.
actually able to do it there. So you literally had cancer surgery that was beyond needed, and you were not allowed in.
No, I wasn't. And my worry was that they hadn't removed all the cancer, and why was I holding on to a breast that could possibly kill me? So it was 7 months then of literally calling my surgeon's office on a weekly basis, sometimes even crying and begging them to not let me die. And it was a horrible, horrible time. In the midst of that, I'm undergoing 7 months of chemotherapy, 20 rounds of radiation. And I mean, I was just spent.
So
Um,
during that 7 months without the surgery, you were still getting chemo.
I was, yes.
So they're
So
willing to
treat,
do that, just not willing to
right.
bring you in for the surgery because that makes sense. Well, you know what? They make more money off of the chemo, but I'm not going to say anything.
Yes. So the treatment, I mean, to tell you the truth, I was worried that they were going to cancel treatments. And then um the vaccine came into play and I was refusing to be vaccinated, I thought, oh my gosh, they might even tell me that I can't come to the hospital. Now, knock on wood, that didn't happen.
That did happen.
Um,
That actually happened in the States.
it did happen in the
There was
States.
trans
Yes.
people needed life-saving, and I would love to know, I would love to follow up with those, but there was life-saving transplants that were halted, even though both parties agreed, and sometimes both parties were unvaccinated, would not allow it to happen if they were not vaccinated. Unbelievable. Sorry, go
It's
ahead.
insane. It's
It's insane.
insane.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I finally was told that I could have surgery, but what I was told, Anthony, is that I was only able to have mandatory surgery. So I said, what is mandatory surgery? So they said, well, mandatory surgery is only on the breast with the cancer. So I said, okay, so you want me to go in for a mastectomy of one breast, leave the other breast, and then what happens? I still have a threat of it, the cancer migrating to the other breast. They said, well, we'll deal with that when that happens. And I thought, well, what kind of a system is this? We're going to wait for cancer to spread to the other breast? I was beside myself, but they were insistent and there was no arguing with them. So in September of 2020, I had the mastectomy of one breast, the breast with breast cancer, and had to wait 2 years to have the mastectomy on the other side. And the only reason that they were willing to do that is because I had gone in for genetic testing. And people will know, like Angelina Jolie, she had tested positive for something called the BRCA gene, BRCA1 and BRCA2, which are two very prevalent genes in breast cancer. And women that have those genes tend to develop breast cancer and ovarian cancer at a higher rate. And so my testing for BRCA2 came back as inconclusive, meaning that they don't know if I have it or don't have it, which is a very odd conclusion. But because it was inconclusive, they were willing to do the mastectomy on the other side.
Why don't people, if it's that big of a telltale sign, why don't we make that like a mandatory test?
So it's starting to be in the United States. Women are being tested for different genes, and it's a panel of 100 and some odd genes in the states that women are being tested for at a younger age. And a lot of women are making a preemptive decision to have a preventative mastectomy, which is a really difficult decision. Imagine being in your 20s and removing your breasts. But I applaud those women that make that decision, knowing that there's probably an 80 to 90 something percent that they'll develop breast cancer in their lifetime. Up here in Canada, it took me 2 years to get genetic testing done. It took 8 months to get the results, 8 months to get results for genetic testing. And they're only testing a panel of about 18 genes up here. So nowhere conclusive at all.
So In the months, so February till essentially when they started finally being able to do the first surgery, which was
Hmm.
September of 2020, right? Is that what?
Yes.
So that was heart of the beginning of the pandemic. What was what was the what were the what were you doing for a living? Because everything was weird in every country. So like, I know you work at a school, right? So
Hmm.
were you still working, or were you too sick to work?
So I was able to work from home. And I mean, oddly enough, pre-pandemic, I started a new job that was actually less work than the job that I had prior to the pandemic, and a little bit more pay. And so I was able to still work. Now, a lot of times I would get home from chemo and I'd be too sick and tired to work. So I'd stay up late at night and work. Called in sick a lot, and I just did it that way. But if I would have had to have gone into work, there was no way I was going to be able to do it.
Um, so how did and explain to me how Canada worked? Were they giving stimulus checks to people? How were, I mean, not everybody was employed still, not everybody could work from home. Just explain, and I know you've done obviously the research, probably what it was like in America comparatively. So what was it like in Canada? Because I know the people in the United States, we don't look outside of our box until we feel like it affects a world level. We didn't pay attention to Canada until the truckers banded together. So what were things like during the pandemic, and was it different in different provinces?
Well, I mean, it was quite dire. I mean, for people that were working and laid off, or business owners, I mean, they were unrelenting. They weren't letting businesses open. The big box stores were able to be, Costco and all those large, Lowe's and Home Depot, they were all open.
Of course it was.
Um, but the small mom and pop stores and the smaller businesses, they were closed. And our pandemic lockdowns lasted a lot longer than yours did. And so they were handing out stimulus checks. My understanding for some of the small businesses is what they were doing is that they were giving them loans and giving them a certain amount of time to pay back the loan. The problem is that some of these businesses weren't opening up, so they were saying, how can I repay these loans?
Right.
For individuals, I mean, I think for working Canadians, they were uh, done dirty, for lack of a better way of putting it, in that you were given the same amount of money that a 17-year-old unemployed high school student was given. And that was Trudeau buying his future voters, in my opinion. So there was a kid down the street. He was 16 years old and bought a brand new car. And he told my husband, he said, "This is the greatest thing ever. I'm getting $1,700 a month. I was making nothing before because I never had a part-time job. And $1,700 was also what was given to people that were laid off, that were making a lot more."
They were making $7,000 a month. They went down to 1,700.
Right.
And I think there was similar mistakes made on a governmental level or in the United States, and I think that's what woke people up. Do you think that I mean, the voting base, you don't have to win by a majority in Canada, like we talked about before the call started, before the show
Right.
started. Do you think that started shifting voter mentality on Trudeau and the administration?
In a positive light, or?
No, I mean, you would. I mean, obviously, you said the younger people that were like, "Oh, free money, shit, bring it," compared to the older people that were SOL, shit out of luck. Like, did that help wake some people up to the negatives of the socialist government?
I mean, I think some people can see it and saw what was going on, but there's a number of people that just weren't getting it. I do think that more of the middle class, like middle class, middle aged people, kind of get what's going on. The younger people are like socialist by nature. They're being taught this at school, and then all you need is Trudeau to give you a nice stimulus check, and that obviously makes you more inclined to vote for him. And the older people, like the boomers, that bought their houses cheap and got a job out of high school and stayed in that job for 40 years. They didn't, I mean, I'm not saying no, baby boomers haven't had a hard time, but um, not compared to other generations. And so I think that that's where his support is. It's kind of the older group and it's the younger group that are supporting him still to this day.
Unreal. I mean, and it's weird to think of like, so I mean, we had stimulus stuff, we had little things here and there, but it was somewhat like the unemployment. It was based on you had to have worked in the past. It was capped. Um, it was different. When you're looking at somebody that never worked before, just getting handed $1,700 a month, it wasn't like that. I mean, uh,
Mind blowing.
that is mind blowing. So you got your first surgery in September of 2020.
Hmm.
You knew you took the testing, it was inconclusive. You had the second. When did you have the second mastectomy?
So I had the second mastectomy just this past May, in May of 2022. So it was a long haul to getting the second one done. And there's a whole bunch of things that go along mentally with that as well. In the early stages of cancer, you're dealing with like, am I going to survive, and am I going to get the treatment that I need? But then physically, to be walking around with one breast and one breast removed and doing that for about 2 years. I mean, that kind of weighed on me and in addition to all the worry that goes on of, is the cancer gone, because they don't do a lot of imaging here. And
Yeah.
what I mean by that is that at the end of my treatment, I was told that I should assume that the cancer was gone. And I said, what? And I said, well, what about an MRI? And what about a CT scan? Like, let's check at least my torso to see what's going on. And they said, no, I'm sorry, we don't do that. And the reason they don't do that in a socialized healthcare system is because that costs money. And they're
Yeah.
not spending money on the healthcare system in Canada is reactive. We'll treat you, but we're not trying to prevent something or catch something early.
Yeah, and that's, I made a mistake earlier. I said how, well, they kept giving you the chemo because they keep charging for it, but that's not quite how it works, I don't think, in the Canadian economy and government. It's essentially they're doing whatever they can to spend the least amount of money, actually. So that was actually, it's
Yes.
probably less than the actual surgery. So I misspoke earlier. So when you had the second, and it was questionable about the second breast needing to be removed, when you got it done, did they it sounds like they didn't even biopsy it, they didn't check it, they didn't even tell you if you needed to get it removed or anything like that?
They didn't tell me if I needed to have it removed. I will say, though, that when it was removed, the tissue was biopsied, again, sent to the States to be biopsied, and it was shown that they did not find cancer in that breast.
Got it.
But for peace of mind, I was happy to have that surgery done.
Yeah, and you're more evened out at that point. With
Absolutely. I
it.
mean, the thing is though too is that I'm sure we'll get into it soon, but talking about Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and from a lot of ladies, I've heard things like, well, at least now you get to have a breast augmentation. And I'm thinking, ladies, if you knew like the scars and the lopsidedness and all the other things that come along with it. This is not a breast augmentation. This is something to make you feel kind of sort of normal.
Yeah.
But it's not really normal.
Do
Hmm.
you mind me asking your age, or give me a general gauge?
Yeah, I'm in my early 40s.
Oh, wow, I actually thought you were in your 30s, so okay.
Oh,
Um, awesome. So, um, do you have like, how long have you been married for?
I've been married for 8 years now.
8 years. Any health problems growing up, or was this just all of a sudden the first thing that just hit you smack dab in the head?
No, I mean, like nothing serious at all, and no family history of breast cancer. There is a family history of certain cancers, but no breast cancer. Hmm.
So the emotion behind, obviously, I mean, you had to deal with it. It's such a weird part in our world, but just from a breast cancer perspective, um, was the fear of death comes first, And then
Mhm.
it is a fear of, like you said, having one breast, two breasts, feeling weird, not feeling. A lot of women that I've spoken with that have had dealt with the mastectomies. Was there something behind it that really truly was hard to handle from just feeling like a woman perspective?
Yeah, I mean, definitely you feel like some of your femininity is gone. Uh, you know, I've called myself Frankenstein at times. I was someone that didn't have any scars, and all of a sudden, I mean, I have so many scars. I wouldn't know how many to tell you that I have at this point. Um, on top of that, going through cancer and cancer treatment during the pandemic was very lonely. For the first, I don't know if it was 4 or 5 months. I mean, I was being told by my oncologist that if I caught COVID, I was going to die. And so I didn't see my parents, and I didn't see my extended family and my husband, and no one has ever been able to come to me with me to any of my treatments. I still go once a month for injections to kind of keep my hormones at bay.
Still to this
And
day, they're not allowed in there with you.
no, I did notice at the hospital the last time I went that they said that older people are allowed to have one person come with them, but no, in my cancer center, we're not allowed to have anyone come with us, and
And
so that was very lonely too.
these
You know.
treatments are no joke either. They're not fun. Like you and having some and I'll digress back to this whole bigger picture of the pandemic. To me, the biggest crime played to human beings were making people die alone. And I'm in Canada, I'm
Mhm.
sure it was the same way. And when it came to even people, whether they were dying from COVID or heart conditions or whatever it might be, not allowing a guest in there is such a strain on the human psyche. It is insane to think that people actually even made it through it. And some people survived. It's such a sick, twisted thing for something that had such a small shrivel of a death percentage, a fatality mortality rate. It's it's that was something that could have been seen in month 4. This does
Oh,
not have the
100%.
percentage, and we didn't even allow people to be until the day they died. Like, it's so dumb. I had somebody that became a close friend of mine on some of our shows passed away, and he did not even get to see his husband, his loved ones, his friends until the last couple hours of his life when he was fully in a coma. Didn't get to see them anyways. It's like these. It's such a sickness, and I'm sure there's people like you that had cancer that did not fare as well as you did, that probably didn't have the support, like didn't have the internal support and toughness to make it through. It's those the numbers of deaths are so skewed because of the way we treated it, not the actual illness.
I mean, there's a situation that happened. I mean, the thing is, though, too, not having someone come in with you, you're not feeling well and you're going in for treatment. And, sometimes I'm doing 6 to 7 hours of a chemo drip. And, and you don't even have a loved one to advocate for you there. And so there was one incident that happened that one of the nurses, there was a certain chemotherapy. The non-technical name of it's called the Red Devil. It's a really toxic chemotherapy that they use in breast cancer. And she injected the chemotherapy into my arm instead of into the vein. Long story short, what followed was that I developed blood clots in my arm, and they started to migrate to my lungs. I had an infection, and I found myself in the hospital for 2 weeks. I mean, it's like you're a bloody criminal when you're in the hospital. One of the nurses, she snuck my husband in for one visit in 2 weeks. You weren't allowed to leave your bed. So imagine being in your bed for 2 weeks because they don't want you leaving the room. Even though they had tested all of us to ensure that we didn't have COVID, they wouldn't let us leave our rooms. I
And my bad,
mean,
infections are how a lot of people die, like these secondary infections. So you had something that was probably potentially fatal, and you had to lie there by yourself, except for one day, one night, for 2 weeks.
that was it. And, I'm going to parlay this into something else, like, so I had 6 months of blood thinners that I was on. I had an infection that I had to try to beat. My arm is deformed. It's concaved and bruised. And I'm on painkillers to this day because of the pain that it causes me. And in the midst of this, my husband said, well, there's got to be something we can do here for pain and suffering. Let me at least contact a lawyer to see if we could sue. And the funny thing is what we found out is that there's basically no malpractice in Canada. You can't sue the hospitals and the doctors. Short of death, there's no suing, which is another thing in a socialized healthcare system that people don't know. And I didn't know myself.
Well, we've given the right to pharmaceutical companies in the United States and all over the world to do whatever the hell they want, no matter what happens today in America.
Right.
Uh, well, you guys don't follow the CD? The CDC isn't your governing body, is it out there?
We don't, but our governing body does follow what the CDC says, and politicians up here do quote the CDC.
Yeah,
So
that's what I thought. Okay. So today
mhm.
we made it, and I make sure we'll get back to Breast Cancer Awareness Month because I know there's some good and bad to that. But today we made it recommended. The CDC panel, APIC or APCI, whatever it's called, made it recommended for children, a group that never got affected by COVID, less than the flu, and made it recommended. And there's obviously the right wing. We often take the bait the wrong way. Oh, that means that it's going to be required for schooling. It's not, but it's a state issue, just like Roe versus Wade, just like all these different things. And if a state has an ultra left lead, and let's remember, even if a state is ultra left, 40% of that state might be conservative or might not want their children to get jabbed, and they could be forced in order to go in a public school system. We are facing in our country, in the United States of America, a greater form of taxation without representation than we ever have in the past because all these shots are subsidized here.
Right.
It's crazy. So up there, you are unvaccinated. What is it? What is it? So are you guys doing all the boosters just like we have out here?
They are, but the uptake for the boosters hasn't been what the government thought it would be. Trudeau had purchased 10 vaccinations per person. That's per person, per baby, child, adult. And so, and we have heard, I don't know the validity of it. I mean, don't quote me, but I wouldn't put it past him that I have heard that he has stock in one of the components in the vaccines, and that's why he's pushing it here so much, as many of them do, I'm sure, politicians, I mean.
Of
So,
course.
but the uptake for a third and fourth vax hasn't been what it was. But at the same time, up here, many people got the vaccination because you weren't allowed to travel if you weren't vaccinated. You were losing your job. I almost lost my job because I wasn't vaccinated, and I'm working from home. They still wanted me to be vaccinated to work because I said, well, apparently, I guess I'm transmitting the COVID that I don't have through Zoom or something like that, you know?
Through the microphone. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
We had Casey's a guy in one of our shows. His wife works from home, and I think she's required to go into the office. It was once a month during COVID. It dropped like once every 6 months, and she was being forced to be vaccinated for a fully at home position with one time coming in.
It's sick.
Unbelievable. It's
Yeah.
it's crazy. And your guys was even worse up in Canada. You truly had the digital passports. I'm not gonna lie. I know there's a lot of people with the sketchy stuff in the United States of America that are, I mean, a little bit easier to duplicate. Canada's was much harder if people wanted to skirt the system.
Well, I mean, listen, we weren't allowed to go anywhere. You weren't allowed in a restaurant, a museum. You were basically a prisoner in your own country. And I said, basically, if you were not vaccinated in this country, and it still might happen again, we're not in the clear because they're saying that they're going to bring lockdowns back again. But you were
Right
treated
now,
like a, sorry.
they're saying that right now.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Is your numbers
Yes.
back up?
They're not keeping track of the numbers anymore because I think people aren't going to be tested for COVID. So they used to have that weekly update on the news, or at least yeah, normally a weekly update of how many people had it, were in hospital, and now they don't show that because I think the numbers are so low and people aren't going for testing anymore. But they don't want us to know that. But they want that consummate threat over us that, if you guys don't get vaccinated, we're going to bring back lockdowns. And that's what they constantly tell us.
That's crazy. And yeah, and that's got to be the carrot at the end of it is the fact that obviously they want more vaccines, which again, it's it's a socialized healthcare system, but who benefits from that? There's got to be people that are making money, like you said. We don't know who's got stakes in what, but when it's socialized, you want to spend less money. So it just because I mean, you guys pay enough taxes anyways. What is your tax rate up there?
The tax rate for the middle class is hovering around 30%. And, I hate this concept that people act like a socialized healthcare system is free. Just to give you a point of comparison, there's 39 million Canadians. We've got about a tenth of the population of the US. And in 2021, we were spending $308 billion per person just on healthcare. Now that's per person. That's not per working person. If
Wait,
you
not
just did it,
not 308 billion. Okay, wait, 308 what?
$308 billion a year we spend on healthcare.
Not per person though. That would be
No, no, no.
all
So
right.
if you worked it out per person, it's about $8,000 per person in
Okay,
taxation
so it's 308 billion across the board. Okay, got it.
across the board.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And so, but if you did it based on the people that are working, you'd probably have to double that, right? Because if you took out children and retirees, right, and people that aren't working, you probably have about half the population working. Now, that's a lot of money. And that's just money being spent on healthcare. What about infrastructure? What about, the government, everything else that our education and everything else our government
Military,
is spending money
police,
on?
education. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know so there's nothing free about it.
Yeah.
And it's a huge misconception that it is a free system.
So do you guys have free university out there as well?
So it's subsidized. It's very, very cheap. If you asked a university student, they wouldn't agree with me, but I mean, it's thousands of dollars per course, so it's not expensive at all.
Compared to the
Hmm.
United States. So back to
Yeah.
COVID real quick. So you guys, you are a second class citizen, which is the way it was in parts of America. Where I live in Texas. We barely wore masks for a couple weeks. My girlfriend's a cowboy, so a cowgirl. So we lived in
Right.
it was great. Like I moved out of the city right at the right time. Thank God. Um, but it's been about 3 weeks since the restriction was lifted where I can now go back to Canada. She has a lot of rodeo friends. I know that there was the Canadian, what is it? What rodeo is big up there? She's gonna kill me for
Oh,
not knowing.
Calgary Stampede.
Thank you, Calgary Stampede. A
Hmm.
lot of those people either had cards or really did have to get vaccinated. I know one specifically got one. She was deathly ill on her deathbed for 2 weeks after she got it. I'm sure it was coincidental. Completely healthy 30-year-old.
Right.
When did the restrictions lift in terms of going to restaurants where like somebody like you when was it where you were able to go and live like a normal human being?
I think that was like last spring, spring of 2022. It's kind of a bit of a mumbo jumbo in my head because flight restrictions came off in the summer as well, where you could fly, but they could still, there's something called an Arrive Can app, and you had to download it on your phone and fill out if you were vaccinated or not vaccinated. And the controversy around that was that you could be fully vaccinated and they could still tell you and test negative for COVID upon arriving back into Canada, and they could still tell you to quarantine for 2 weeks.
Why?
So I have no idea. I have no idea. It was a control mechanism, and I don't know what they were controlling. And so that Arrive Can app was just dropped at the end of September, and I was told that that was more from an economic standpoint than anything else. I mean, because it was keeping a lot of business from Canada.
How when they told people to quarantine, how did they follow up on it? Were they just telling people to quarantine and people were just lemmings and they go, okay, I'll quarantine? Or was
No,
it
I actually have a friend. She's American, but she lives in Canada, and so she visits family in the States, and she was fully vaccinated, or is fully vaccinated, I should say. Um, And so when she would come back into Canada, they would tell her to quarantine for 2 weeks. And so they would call her. They would call her up and see where she was. And we did find out. I mean, I think it was we weren't supposed to find out, but we did find out that they were tracking people as well. So they were
geolocated?
tracking people through their phones to see where
Yeah.
they were.
Wow. Absolutely wow. That is And here's my thought. If the vaccine worked the way that they said it did originally, And here's the thing, this is why I think they always knew that it didn't work. Is if it worked, they wouldn't have done the tracking. They wouldn't have forced to say, 2 weeks of quarantine. They wouldn't have done that because if they knew, say they didn't know, then they would be doing that. And then they would be honest. They say, we don't know if it works or not. We're going to have to track you. Instead, they said, it's perfect. It works. And we're going to track you. That to me is evidence that they knew there is no way, shape, or form that this was not going to have a massive amount of breakthrough infections, period. So
Absolutely.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I agree with you completely. I mean, it's a ridiculous. They knew, as they've come out now and said that they knew that it wasn't stopping transmission by being vaccinated. You and I both knew that from the beginning. We didn't need to be told this. But it was one of the ploys that they used to say, if you're not vaccinated, you're a threat to me. And that's what happened in Canada. Is that here I am going about my business, staying away from people, staying as healthy as I can be. Let's face it, I've gone through cancer. I'm not looking for another illness, of large proportion or smaller proportion to have. And yet I'm being treated like a second class citizen, saying, you're a threat to me. You're not vaccinated. You're someone that is going to get people sick with COVID. Might I add, I've never had COVID. So
That was my next question. Have you caught it at all?
I haven't. I mean, I feel like it's a matter of time until I get it. But at the same time, I feel like it's all these vaccinated people living like, they're living loose. They're the ones that are spreading it around, because everyone that I know that isn't vaccinated, they haven't really, not everyone, but a lot of them haven't gotten it.
Or we didn't have
So
a severe case. My girlfriend's unvaccinated. She never had it. I mean, she might have. You might have, and it might have
that's
just gone
true.
through the system. I had the quote unquote Delta strain. It was a bitch. It was a rough 10 days. Like I've never had the
Mhm.
flu, so it was like, did I ever feel like I was dying? No, but it was just exhausting, is all I could say. And then I had Omicron. That was a cold. Like that was a flat out cold. Like that was all that was. I was felt rough for about a day and a half. But yeah, it's interesting because I mean, theoretically, you were dealing with cancer stuff. If you would have got it, you according to them originally, you should have been dead. You
Right.
should be dead. I mean, if it was that bad, it's just
The thing
so.
is that there was never a balance of mental versus physical. So it was, if you get COVID, you're going to die. During cancer treatment, during chemotherapy, where you have zero immune system, you're going to die. But at the same time, mentally, I felt like I was struggling because there was no support. um that I wasn't allowed to be around anyone. So that was that isolation. And
Did you
imagine people
question?
that were in hospitals for, like you said before, like, days, weeks, months without anyone visiting them. I mean, it's horrible.
Bill Maher actually just said we're starting to see some of the after effects, and some of the statistics in the United States are just jaw dropping. One of my biggest issues, I'm like, for all you empathetic leftists uh, that think that schools should be on lockdown right now, who are big into the BLM and all that bullshit. And yes, we all know that Black Lives Matter. The organization is the biggest crock of shit in history. But
Mhm.
um, if you really give a shit, allowing them to close schools when there was no evidence that kids were really getting it at a high rate was horrific, because these kids did not have access to the parents at home. The less privileged you were, the less opportunity you had to continue education. So they just came out with the new test results. On a lot of the testing in kids, we are at a 30-year low. We have regressed 30 years in a matter of 2 years, of 2 years of the pandemic. 30 years we've been set back in our education levels. And on top of it, in terms of health, the BMI on kids age 2 to 19 has gone up. Did they say 50% or 100? Is it doubled? I think they said doubled. The BMI from age 2 to 19 has doubled. If we care about health, everything we did literally destroyed our country. Destroyed anything that we have. Brains, body, all of it. Horrible.
Well, in a way, the way I always think about it is that we sacrificed the young for the old, and I've had people in my family though too that are in their 70s and 80s, and we're like, well, the kids shouldn't be in school, and the kids shouldn't be going and playing sports. And I'm thinking, what? Why? When you were that age, you were given free reign to do whatever you wanted, and now these kids have to be locked up indefinitely. I mean, this is just a ridiculous concept.
I think
Um,
they were brainwashed to think that no, like, and that's my question. Couldn't somebody just simply like go here? This is the statistic. It is, even if you are elderly and sick, it's still a 1% mortality rate. Like,
right.
nothing matches up to the government. Look here. Why can't I think people really still to this day, especially probably in Canada, maybe think that it was a 10% mortality rate. Do people still think that way?
They do, and the numbers were skewed up here, as I'm sure they were in the States. I mean, we know a situation where it was an individual that died in a car crash, and then when they did the autopsy, they were found to have COVID. The cause of death was put as COVID. And the family said, absolutely not. The cause of death was a car accident. And so that's what was happening. People were going, and I said, I've said this to some cancer patients that I know, arguing my point with them is that if you went into the hospital and you were stage 4 cancer and you happened to have COVID, your cause of death was listed as COVID, not stage 4 cancer. And I said, that's really bad for the cancer community. They said, well, why is that? And I said, it's because cancer funding is largely based on the number of deaths. And so if the deaths are down, as I'm sure they are for heart disease and every other disease too, because COVID deaths went up and all the other diseases, the deaths went down. And guess what happens? Government funding goes down for research for all of those diseases. People say, oh, not as many people are dying from breast cancer. What am I going to donate to that for? What a waste of money. But but they're obsessed with COVID here. Still to this day, they're obsessed with it.
Yeah, and the statistics. Well, I'm going to tell you, there'll be plenty of money for cancer research after this year because I don't know if you guys are seeing the same numbers that we are in the States, but our cancer rates are through the roof. If it's
Mm-hmm.
connected to the thing that goes in the arm, I don't know. I'll leave it there. Let's I want to talk about one kind of like social issue, but first let's talk about, so it is breast cancer awareness month and you say there's pros and cons to it. So what are your issues with breast cancer awareness month?
I
Curious.
mean, I think, obviously Breast Cancer Awareness Month is an important month for bringing awareness to the disease, and this specific type of disease. But it's kind of an odd thing. Before having breast cancer, it was what it was, and then after having breast cancer, you say, well, why is this month like pink and pretty and fluffy, and when there's nothing fluffy and pink and pretty about it. I mean, there was an ad that I've seen on Instagram a number of times, and it said, "This is the way breast cancer is presented to you," and it has like a pink ribbon and a pink teddy bear, and and girls smiling. And then it has another picture of women with mastectomies and their chest showing, and drainage tubes and a million scars, and the loss of hair through chemo-induced alopecia. And that's what breast cancer is to me and to others going through this horrible disease. So I think it's a weird way to market it. I don't know if it works. In my opinion, I think if they presented it for what it was, I think it would garner a lot more money. But maybe I don't know. I don't know anything. So
And I mean, your guys, the way that you had to deal with it was very different. So you had a weird thing. You deal with it from a Canadian standpoint, which is obviously very
mhm.
different in the United States. What would you tell? So, and you dealt with it during a pandemic, which I mean, the fact that you're still here, kudos, well done, well done. Um,
Thank
would,
God.
do you? Is there talking to young people in America?
Mm.
It doesn't include me, to be very clear. That are going, we need to go to a social fully, and we already have a semi-subsidized healthcare system, but we need to go to Bernie Sanders version, full subsidized social healthcare. What would be your warning to them if you can drop some knowledge?
My warning would be number one, that it's not free. I mean, the first thing I would say is that, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I thought in a socialized healthcare system that I would have all my treatments and medications paid for by the government. They weren't. I've probably had to pay upward of $60,000 out of pocket. Now I happen to have a very good insurance system through my work, through my employer. So I've been lucky in that way, but that's a substantial amount of money to have to pay in a so-called subsidized healthcare system.
Explain
The
that to me. Explain how that works.
Yeah. So for example, like the chemotherapy is paid for, but there's a whole bunch of drugs that you have to take through chemotherapy and injections that you have to do. Like through chemotherapy, every week I had to do an injection that was $2,000, and that's 7 months of chemotherapy. So I can't do the math, but um,
So 2000, how often?
every week for 7 months.
8,000. So you're looking at 8,000 for 7 months. You're looking at, I mean, 60, what is it? $64,000.
I'm on an injection now too that is about $2,000 per month. I'm on it indefinitely. This is also not paid for by the government. So again, it's not all roses up here.
So
Yeah,
your insurance, you had work insurance that covered most of that.
right. So most Canadians do have work health insurance, and I mean I happen to have a very good one, but most employers do have a robust health insurance program. Yes,
What's the
right?
point? What's the point of? I didn't know this. This is news to me. So, what's the point of socialized healthcare? So, okay. So, what if I work for my? What if I'm an entrepreneur and I live in Canada? I own my own business. I don't. I'm starting out. I don't have a lot of money. I don't say I wanted to buy insurance. I could still buy insurance for myself, correct?
Yes, if you're self-employed, you could buy your private insurance. So the way you need to see a socialized healthcare system, such as the Canadian system, is that if I go to the emergency room right now, I don't come out with a bill. If I stay in the hospital for 2 or 3 weeks, I don't come out with a bill. So the hospital stays, and for example, like in cancer, the treatments, the radiation, the chemotherapy, the surgeries, none of this is paid. I don't pay for it personally. I pay through my tax dollars, but I don't
Right.
pay for it personally. Now all the drugs and a lot of treatments, that's paid for privately by your own personal insurance, either your work insurance, or if you're self-employed, by the insurance that you would purchase.
So say you're broke, you can't afford your own insurance, and you've got a crappy job. You work at I don't know, maybe things are, but like say you work at a McDonald's or a clothing store,
Hmm.
making $15 an hour, and you're part time, whatever, trying to raise a family. You get in a bad car accident, you're able to get free healthcare, great, but there's medication you need to be on to heal your whatever. You just shit out of luck, or you pay out of pocket.
Shit out of luck. You'll probably go on disability, and there's probably some type of compensation through disability, but otherwise, I mean, I don't know. I
So
was told by the hospital, I know they had said, oh, we've got all these medications you have to be on. They're very expensive. And if you can't pay for them, contact us, and we're going to help you find a way to pay for it. Now I don't know what that meant
take
because I
out
never
better.
looked into it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they contact the drug manufacturers, and I have no idea. I'm not sure what that entails.
So what
Hmm.
would so do you have any idea how much private insurance would cost? Like say I had my own small business, like and I had so I'm already paying tax dollars. Any idea how much it would cost for me to insure myself? Like ours just went up. I mean, there's been years I've paid 500 a month and there's 300 a month or whatever it is.
I
It goes,
don't, yeah, unfortunately, I don't know what that is. I've never had to look into it myself because I've always worked in a unionized environment where we've had like quite robust insurance. So,
it's
yeah.
interesting. So
Well, the
essentially,
other thing,
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
I was to say they'll keep you from dying, but they might not keep you from dying forever. Like
100%. And the
I
other thing I
don't
want to say though too is that, while everyone thinks that everything's paid for in a socialized system, my argument against a completely socialized healthcare system as well is that all my American counterparts that are having scans every 6 months, and they're keeping an eye on whether the cancer has come back. And they're doing genetic testing of 100 and some odd genes. And all that stuff is not available here. When I've asked to go for an MRI, head to toe, my type of cancer tends to metastasize to the large bones and to the brain. And so it's very important for me at some point to have like a head to toe MRI. And I was told by my doctor that you better go stateside, go pay for it in the States because you're not getting one here.
Jesus Christ.
Hmm.
I know we had pictures of you with when you had the cancer. Do you want to show them? We don't need to show them if you.
That's okay. Yeah, I mean, it's part of my journey. And, I remember going to the drugstore once, and I knew I looked horrible, but I remember one of the cashiers, she asked me if I wanted the seniors discounts. And I said, oh God, this is even worse than I thought. But it is part of the experience and the journey. And there's nothing light about cancer. It's devastating, and it's not just devastating to yourself, it's devastating to your entire family. So
So this one, you still did a good pose there. You still kind of gave a little bit of the eyebrow raise. You still managed to, make it
I
work.
did. That was after a surgery too. So I was in like knee deep, head deep in it at that point.
Yeah.
Hmm.
When was this? Would you say in the journey, in your
That
journey?
was no, when was that? That was in March of 2020.
Oh, that
Hmm.
was early. That was right in the beginning when they started treating. And then
Yes.
when was this one? You could tell
That was,
you've lost your eyebrows in that one.
yeah, I think that was by August of 2020. All the hair was gone. And yeah. And the one that I mean, like a silly side note is that everyone always talks about the hair on your head going and your eyebrows, but no one talks about your nose hair going. And I had a real problem with a runny nose all the time. You don't realize how much the hair in your nose kind of keeps things at bay. But
So
yeah,
is
it was.
this fully your hair now?
No, I'm wearing a wig. So that was one of the fun things that came out of cancer treatments, is that I purchased some wigs, and they're pretty pricey, so I still make use of them.
Oh,
Hmm.
nice. How long can you grow your hair now? Now that when was the last time you were on chemo?
It was September, yeah,
2021.
September of 2020. So it's been quite some time now. Yeah.
Can you grow it pretty long now, or have you still had trouble growing it back?
No, it's very slow. I know different people have a different growth rate, but I've kind of had like a male pattern baldness kind of growing out, that the hair at the top of my head is growing very, very slow, and at the back it's growing faster. So I cut the back, and hopefully the top will catch up at some point.
Oh, it's crazy. How important? I've once. We'll do the social subject last, but how uh, how important was it? And I'm assuming your husband was very supportive. How important was it to at least have him at home with you?
100%. I was very lucky that because he's a teacher, he was able to work from home. And so having him there, you don't realize how much care you need. You're just completely like zonked. I don't even know how to say it. Like there'd be times where I'd sleep sometimes for upward of 20 hours a day. I was just so incredibly tired and weak. And it's the nausea. And so even if you're not vomiting, just that constant feeling of being sick, it just starts to really mess with you after a while. So having someone there with you is so important. I don't know these people that go through it by themselves. I mean, God bless them.
Unreal. So for you personally, and this is kind of the last little political thing, and then we'll wrap up.
Mhm.
Have you? And I know you said you're a conservative, you're Christian, I believe is what you said. Have you always been a conservative?
No, I haven't. I mean, I grew up in a more conservative household. And so in high school, I was conservative. And then I got hit with university. I went left,
Wow.
like a lot of university students do. But just even like thinking, I mean, Canadian conservatism is a little bit different than American conservatism. Up
What
here,
is
there,
it? Explain it.
so conservatism in Canada typically means fiscally conservative in terms of money. That we want our government to spend less money, but not socially conservative. I tend to be more socially conservative as well. So the American version of conservatism jives with me a bit better.
Yeah.
But but I will say that when Obama ran, I was like, I cried on the night that he that
Really?
he became president of the United States. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. So it's more in recent years that I've gone right, and I guess from the Canadian standpoint, I've gone too far right, but I
Is there
think I'm
any
right where
party
I
that
need to be.
represents you in Canada?
Sorry. Oh,
Is there
any
any party,
party.
yeah, that represents you in Canada? Because I don't know. You guys have, you said you had 6 different parties, kind of.
Yes. Well, there is the Conservative Party, and there's a new leader of the Conservative Party. His name is Pierre Poilievre, and I mean, he's driving with me. I do like him. He really hammers Trudeau on his policies, and he's for less government spending. Again, though, he's not really socially conservative, but it's just the way things are in Canada. I mean, you
Huh.
can't get it all here.
Yeah. Um, uh, the truckers. I forgot to mention the talk. I asked you about this
Mhm.
earlier. I mean, it was for somebody in the United States of America that was following just everything politically so much. For somebody like you and for the Canadians that I'm sure you still have friends that feel the same as you do, just maybe not very many.
Right.
Was it that big of a deal in Canada what they were doing?
It was. It was newsworthy and in a big way. The problem was is that the way the media up here was portraying them was a bunch of vigilantes that were wreaking havoc on Ottawa and Ottawa patrons, and that they were violent, and it was the complete opposite. I
Is
did
there
go
any
to.
evidence of of violence? I never saw anything.
No, there was nothing at all. It was absolutely ridiculous. And in fact, I guess it was, they were there for a month or so. The time that they were in Ottawa, crime was like at 0%. The homeless were being fed. I mean, it was a great time for Ottawa.
Very different
And
than the Seattle autonomous zone that we had in or Portland, wherever that was, for a month, where there was like multiple people killed, couldn't go out at night, but that was mostly peaceful. Anyways, sorry.
yeah,
I dig-
exactly. Something like that is peaceful, but the truckers convoy wasn't. I did go to Ottawa. I thought it was one of the most like beautiful displays of humanity that I've ever seen in my life. It was, these people that were risking their livelihood because a lot of them had their licenses revoked, and they were losing money while they were there. They didn't have anything personal to gain other than that they were helping their fellow Canadians in terms of trying to get rid of vaccine mandates. And they were just beautiful people. When you were trying to give them money, they wouldn't take it from you. Trying to give them food, they wouldn't take it. It was just like nothing I've ever seen before in my life. It was wonderful.
I attended January 6th, and I can tell you, I'm very glad I did, even though that day was painted so poorly, because I have such a different experience to what the media says. And I think that the hundreds of thousands of people there kind of say the same thing. I know people that lost their mind afterwards because the fact that they know what they saw was not what everybody saw in those 6 minutes looped together over and over. And it's fascinating because, like you said, it is all about manipulating people to make sure that they know that you cannot stand up for yourself and you cannot band together as citizens. That's a scary thought.
That's right. I mean, it also doesn't help that we have one of the largest news stations up here is government funded. So
All of
they
ours are pharmaceutically funded. So what's the difference? I mean,
that's right.
no,
It's true. I guess there isn't really much of a difference. Hmm.
no. So my one social question for you, and again, I personally am. I voted for Obama. I was born and raised liberal, and I still consider some of my beliefs liberal. Again, if somebody's gay, I don't care. get married. I really don't give a shit. More again, I'm less government. I want less control, less regulation. However, in the United States of America, specifically Texas, something is very weird going on with this woke gender ideology and the trans concepts. And again, if somebody's transgender, I think they can be a great person. I've got no issues with them as a human being. It
Mhm.
is a mental disorder, in my personal opinion. Just like if you refer to yourself as a they in terms of your pronouns, that means you have multiple personalities. I love you no different, but you do have a mental disorder. And us saying how great it is a little weird to me. Do they have that? Are you guys having, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but are you having the same issues in Canada with some of this gender ideology stuff?
Yeah, and arguably, I feel like it kind of started earlier over here than it did south of the border. You guys know of Jordan Peterson. I mean,
Of
Jordan
course.
Peterson worked for University of Toronto, one of the larger universities in Ontario, in Canada, I should say, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I might be misquoting things a little bit, but what had happened is that one of his students wanted him to refer to them as like they, them, or Z, X, I, X,
Caesar, X,
E,
Y, yeah.
one of those things.
Onomatopoeia, yeah.
And he refused.
Yeah.
And so then that created a whole hoopla at the university, and he was suspended, or I think he was taken off his tenure track or status, and then he started being the person that he is and traveling all over the world talking out against that and different things. So yeah, that's been going on over here for a while. I mean, I can say with my employer as well that I have to put in my tagline for my email that I'm she, her, and I'm told all these things, and I don't know,
We have
what do I say about it?
says his pronouns are the, she, and it. The shit. That's clever.
I think the thing is that I didn't have a problem with all of it when it was that, because my whole thing is live and let live, right? If you're not hurting someone else, then I don't have a problem with it. But when I see children undergoing gender reassignments and surgery, and kind of when it starts to get pushed on other people, now I have a problem with. I was in a meeting the other day, and I thought it was really funny that one of the women, she's like, oh, she goes, no, I mean they, and then again she goes she, and oh no, I mean they, and she couldn't get it right, and I thought, of course you can't get it right, that's
'Cause it's
improper
bullshit.
grammar.
Yeah.
How can you call some, like, one person they,
Yeah.
so
I mean, are you looking at
um
some people? Yeah. So the kids thing is where I was getting to. There was a story, and the fact that so Jeff Younger he's trying to run for office in Texas. I don't think he made it out of the. No, he did make it out of the primary. But he's facing legal action because his child is like 9 or 10 years old, and the mother wants to allow some kind of puberty blockers and a start of transition at the age of 9 or 10, and he says no, which is he is facing charges for that. In New York, there was a 10-year-old, and I think tattoos in children are a pretty dumb idea. Let's be very clear.
mhm.
10-year-old, the tattoo artist and the mother who got this, I guess, a sleeve, and this 10-year-old got arrested, as they should have been. I think that that's great. Well, I don't know if the tattoo artist should be, but the tattoo artist was. Whereas in the United States of America and maybe in Canada, it's being celebrated as a medical procedure, and doctors are making oodles of money doing something very similar to a tattoo. This is a permanent change, and don't tell me gender blockers, puberty blockers are, oh, once you stop taking them. No, it hormonally destroys the system. What we're doing to children, and then with the drag shows on top of it, allowing, and again, I've been to drag shows, I have to say this too. I think drag shows as an adult with comedians, really talented drag queens, it's funny. Like, it is not for children in any way, shape, or form. And we're
No,
pushing it. And it's like, and this is kind of my last question to you. With all these things going on, first off, does that happen? And are they doing these weird drag shows in Canada, or is this an American new thing for
I
kids?
haven't seen anything, and all the examples that I've seen have been in the States, so I'm not aware of it going on up here, but I don't put anything I mean, listen, like, everything goes here, so I wouldn't put it past them to do it here too.
Yeah. I just, from my perspective, it's like I'm so ridiculously open-minded to stuff, but this is just ignorance. Where do you think, as somebody that's looking at from a outside perspective, what you're seeing happen in Canada is bad, and I'm sure some things are better in the United States, some things are worse, kind of like this. What do you think is the end game to all of this?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think it's a huge ploy by the left to change things so greatly that there's a point of no return. Um, I think that they want things to be. I think that they want to, like, they'll look at a place like Canada and says, like, everything goes there, and you're allowed to, like, even with freedom of speech, like, they're trying to take away our freedom of speech. Even me coming on a podcast like this could be problematic in months or years to come. Um, but I do think that they want to change things so drastically that there's a point of no return and that there's no going back. And I do think that that would happen, because with every little thing that you do and it becomes socially acceptable, even how they talk about, there was that professor that said pedophiles should be called minor attracted persons. Well,
Maps.
as soon as you start to normalize pedophilia, there's no going back from that. I'm
No.
sorry. So, and I find it, I don't know, I know this sounds like an odd thing to say as a Canadian. I'm a bit more accepting of things like that happening up here and less so in the States, because I always thought that I've always held the States to a greater accountability than other countries.
We're the freest nation in the world. We're supposed to be. We're supposed to be the leader of the free world.
Right. And so when I see the States going awry, at the hands of the dementia-ridden leader that you have, it saddens me. It really does, and it also scares me, because I know that a lot of Americans don't look outside of the States to see what's going on, but countries like Canada, we are looking at the States to see what's going on there. And as soon as you guys go too far left and too crazy, it's not a good sign for the rest of us.
Not at all. I agree. I'm going to let you have some last words real quick, guys. One of our other affiliates, I did not mention in the beginning, is called ERC Specialists. This is to help you. This is you not buying anything. If you own a business of any kind, whether it be a church, a bank, anything, even if you collected PPP loans, I will be putting the link actually in the comment section below. It's based on if you face any kind of hardship, shutdowns, staffing shortages, supply chain issues in 2020 or 2021, you just fill out a very basic application. I'll help you through it. And it's up to $26,000 per employee based on the employee tax that you paid the year before. A lot of businesses, I think they've paid out well over $1 billion. There is a huge fund for this that a lot of people don't know about, and this is above and beyond PPP. So check that out if you do own a business anywhere in the United States of America. Sorry, Canadians. So check that out. I also just realized who you reminded me of. I've been trying to figure it out this whole time. You kind of remind me of Kimberly Guilfoyle. Have you got that before?
No, I haven't, but I'll take it. She's a good conservative.
Yeah. And do you know who she used to date? Or
I do. Gavin Newsom. She was
News?
married to him.
Yeah, married to Mussolini. Now
Can
she's with
you
Trump.
believe it?
I would
I
love to.
know. When I read that, it blew my mind.
Well, the floor is yours to make sure you tell people where to find you. I know you've got organized. We didn't talk a ton, so talk about the whole concept of organizing your life, what you do. It was a long show, a little longer than I thought, because it was a great conversation. So floor is yours for as long as you need it. Explain things about what you work with other people.
Yeah, I mean, you can follow me on Michelle_organize on Instagram. The organize is because I have an organization business, a side hustle. Um, it's important. I encourage people to find out about breast cancer awareness in their communities and how they can donate. We have the Canadian Cancer Society up here that I've worked for and have helped to raise money for research. And it really is important to be raising money for research as much as it's important to raise money for treatments. If we can start to diagnose all cancers, but breast cancer in particular early, it is a survivable type of cancer. And And we don't want more people to be going through this horrible disease. So yeah, that's it.
When you talk about organizing, what's a basic tip and trick that you give people to start? I'm a big note taker, so I always have notes on me. So what's some of the stuff that you teach in terms of your side hustle and helping people organize?
Like things with like things. So don't if you've got, food in a certain area or a certain type of food, don't have it in three areas of your house. And labeling is key. So whether it's labeling your bills and putting them in like reverse chronological order so you can always find them, or um, just labeling is amazing. I'm an over organizer. I drive my husband crazy, but we can always find everything we're looking for. So I don't think it's that bad.
And you've created a side hustle out of it. It's your specialty.
That's right.
I love it. So everybody can find you at Michelle_organize. You can see that right there. That's on Instagram. Are you also on Facebook of any kind, or more just Instagram where you have people?
I am. I use Facebook though, just for families. So
Fine then. All right. So
yeah.
Instagram, got it. As always, everybody out there, thank you for joining. If you'd like to support the show, you can see it down there, patreon.com/blunt force discussion. I'm wearing the OG Be the Change shirt, but as you guys know, we've got all of our Wake Not Woke gear as well. We do have the new shirt, which I have in my car, just got it, have not put it on yet, but it says, not a single one of us regrets taking it. Something along those lines. And you know what we're talking about. So check out all the stuff on the store, go there. And if there's any of the things you heard about that you want to learn more on, or even if there's something you want me to forward to Michelle, bluntforcediscussion@gmail.com. Thank you guys, as always, for joining. I appreciate you. And remember, there's so many different things going on in this world. The best thing we can do is have conversations with people, be open-minded. We're not always going to be correct. The whole purpose is to not always be right. The only person 100% wrong in an argument is the person that is thinking that they are 100% right. So be open-minded, listen. Also, if you're going to bring the heat, bring some facts, bring some education, and learn about the world around you. God bless, take it easy, and have a great evening or day or whatever. You get it.